Okay, before we dive into the work, I think it's important that we spend some time looking at how other companies have gone global, have taken their websites global. And usually the websites provide a great deal of insight into how the organizations as a whole have gone global. And I'm going to begin here with Apple, because I think this is one of the best known global brands. And what I'd love for you to do going forward is when you surf the internet, when you use your mobile phone and you use apps, start to look for how those apps and websites are configured for users who may not speak English, who may not be based in your home country. Because it's usually there, and it's usually something we overlook because we are in the process of looking for what we want in our own language, for our own country or region. So that's what I'm going to spend a few minutes doing. So let's say we go to apple.com and we land on this page, and I want to navigate to a different country website or a different language. What if I don't speak English and I go to apple.com? What do? Well, I scroll a bit because I'm looking for some sign that I can find content in my language. Let's say it's Russian. Okay, so I scroll down and lo and behold, I see a little flag here. I see US mentioned. And what I land on is Apple's Global Gateway. Now, I should first tell you that I do not recommend using flags, and I will get into that at a much later stage. But Apple does use flags, but I recommend against it. So we go to this really long, somewhat cumbersome menu, and I see a link to the Russian homepage, and I click it, and here we are. We see this is Cyrillic script, and it is for Russian consumers. And you might have noticed something in the header here. Now, this is something relatively new that Apple has begun using, which is geolocation. Which Apple is doing here is it's saying, I know you're not based in Russia. We know you're based in the US, so maybe you want to go to the US website. And this is a technology that a lot of companies use now to make the localized websites more discoverable. So as you start to look at taking your website global and taking your brand global, you have to think about navigation. You also have to think about country codes. Now, let's say I wanted to just go to Apple France. People in France would know to use their country code. Most likely, they would take that front door, which is apple.fr. Now, what Apple does, of course, is it redirects here to apple.com/fr. Not my recommendation, but a lot of companies do that. If I were to say, let's do Microsoft France. And you'll see here that Microsoft redirects as well. It's a slightly different directory code, locale code, but this is the France homepage for Microsoft. And as you're probably starting to get a feel too with Microsoft, and let's change languages here. Let's say I didn't really want to go to the France homepage. I scroll and hey, there's a globe icon, an icon I recommend using. I click on this link and I get to a global gateway. This one is text-based, and I do recommend text-based global gateways. Let's go to Japan. And one thing that I just want to point out briefly is look at the consistency. That's something you're going to learn as you start to take your brand, your products and services global consistency. Now, you also want to be flexible, of course, for local models and local content. And of course, let's take a look at Nivea. Nivea is one of the better websites in terms of localizing their models, which of course makes natural sense for products that deal with your skin and beauty. And so if we look at Nivea China, we have local models generally, and this is Brazil. You notice the content, the languages, the models are often localized. This is Ghana. This is going the extra yard, and is really ultimately what you have to do to be successful locally. Going global is really about going local, one country, one region at a time. Ikea. If I go to Ikea.com, Ikea has a relatively new landing page, in which they give me an option. I can go right to the US homepage, or I can go to another country. Now, I'm at the .com address, and many people in the US assume .com means US. And that's one of the challenges in global navigation. In fact, .com is really a global domain, and many people around the world will visit the .com hoping to find a link to their localized website. And the US website here for IKEA is ikea.com/US/EN. So US country, EN language. Let's move on to Facebook. Now, I'm not going to log in to Facebook, but I do want to point out something that a lot of people may not notice is Facebook supports a lot of languages, and Facebook is language oriented, and they've included a subset of language links here. If you click on this, you're going to see more than 100 languages. This is an extreme example of globalization, but this is one reason why Facebook has billions of users. They have invested very heavily in languages. Finally, let's look at Ford. This is Ford.com. This is the Ford US homepage, and Ford is smart to put the global gateway in the header, which I recommend. But what's interesting here is this is just English and Spanish, because what Ford is doing here is this is the US page, and they've localized for Spanish speakers within the US as well as English speakers within the US. And that's another thing to consider as you go global. It's not just about expanding beyond borders, it's expanding beyond language, expanding beyond culture. So as you go forward and surf the web, and all your websites, your competitor websites as well, start looking for how they organize themselves, how they communicate with users around the world. And they may not do it the best way, so I'm not saying you should copy them. That's what we're also going to cover in this class and future classes. But now that you've gotten a feel for some of these websites and how they communicate with the world, let's move on to diving into best practices.